Namaste and welcome back to the Narrative Now. My name is Sudhanshu Sharma, and today we are discussing the G20 summit to be held in South Africa. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has left for Johannesburg to attend the 3-day G20 Leaders Summit, the first G20 summit ever to be hosted on African soil. This is the Prime Minister's 12th G20 summit since 2014 and his fourth visit to South Africa, a country that has become central to India's outreach to the global south. But before we dive into what India plans to do at this summit, let's take a step back and understand something essential. What exactly is the G20 and why does this meeting matter? Not just for India, but for the world. First, let's try and understand what the G20 really is. You may think of the G20 as the world's most powerful economic roundtable because it brings together 19 of the world's largest economies plus the European Union. And together, they account for 85% of global GDP, 75% of international trade, and 2/3 of the world's population. So, this is not just a talking club, it is where the world's biggest decisions on the economy, climate, global development, debt, and security are shaped, often informally but powerfully. And the G20 matters because when these countries agree on something, the rest of the world feels its impact. Now, let's try and understand why it matters for India. Well, for India, the G20 is not just a forum, it is a platform to define its global leadership. Because under Prime Minister Modi, India has used the G20 to push ideas like the digital public infrastructure as a global good, reforming global financial institutions, climate justice, sustainable development, technology that is accessible to all, and in giving a bigger voice to the global south. Because India's presidency in 2023 was historic, not only for global agreements on digital public infrastructure and climate finance, but also because India achieved something no one else could. India brought the African Union into the G20 as a permanent member. And it was that moment that changed the structure of this group forever. But why is this G20 summit historic? Well, because Johannesburg is hosting the very first G20 summit in Africa. And that alone changes the tone of the entire meeting. As Africa has the youngest population in the world, some of the fastest growing economies, and the deepest development challenges. And this summit symbolizes that the world can no longer ignore Africa's aspirations. And this year's theme, solidarity, equality, and sustainability, also carries forward the spirit of the New Delhi and Rio summits. Now, let's try and understand what Prime Minister Modi's agenda will be in Johannesburg. During the summit, Prime Minister Modi will participate in every major session, present India's views rooted in Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, one earth, one family, one future. He will also hold bilateral meetings, including one with South African President Cyril Ramaphosa. Prime Minister Modi will also attend the 6th IBSA Leaders' Meeting, which is the India, Brazil and South Africa trilateral grouping that coordinates on global issues and promotes cooperation between the three countries. The Prime Minister will also engage with the large and influential Indian diaspora in South Africa. And India's message is clear. Development must be global, not selective. But this summit has not started quietly. A diplomatic rift emerged between South Africa and the White House after Washington confirmed that President Donald Trump would not be attending the G20 summit. The US, on its part, cited scheduling reasons, but South Africa called the decision disrespectful, especially for a summit hosted in Africa for the first time. And in international politics, symbolism matters. And the absence of the president of the world's largest economy naturally raises questions. So, let's try and understand what Trump's absence means for the G20. First, let's be realistic. The G20 is designed to function even without one leader, even a major one. But the absence of the US president has its consequences, as it affects the pace of the global economic discussions, momentum on climate commitments, coordination on global debt restructuring, and the optics of unity. And although it does not derail the summit, it certainly weakens the perception of collective leadership. More than anything, this summit is another opportunity for India to advance the priorities of the global south, the developing countries across Asia, Africa, and Latin America. Because these nations deal with higher debt, lower incomes, climate vulnerability, limited access to capital and technology. But India's position is simple and consistent. Global rules must be fair, inclusive, and reflective of today's realities, not the power structure of 1945. And as India advocates for debt relief for low income countries, climate finance that actually reaches vulnerable nations, accessible technology, disaster resilient infrastructure, a just energy transition, and a global development model that leaves nobody behind. At the G20, India brings these issues to the center of global decision making. So, as PM Modi lands in Johannesburg, the world is watching. The first G20 in Africa, a diplomatic storm before the opening session, and the absence of the US president, and India stepping in once again as the leading voice of the global south. Because ultimately, the G20 is not just about the world's richest nations, it is about shaping a fair and sustainable future for everyone, not just for those with the loudest voice.